Hello and welcome to the 2.10 flipped instructional recording for molecules. I'm going to walk you through this lesson and help you get some notes taking and those guiding questions answered. So don't forget that you will be submitting your science notebook at the end of this unit, so you want to make sure that you add notes to each lesson and answer those guiding questions. And if you struggle with taking notes, just listen for the parts of the lesson that I tell you to add. As you watch the recording, you can pause anything that you may need repeated or if you need more time to write. So as we jump into the lesson, we are continuing on talking about matter, and today specifically talking about molecules. So atoms, molecules, elements, and compounds. These four words are crucial to understanding the world, but many people confuse their definitions and how they are related to one another. This lesson will help you understand these four words and how they are used to describe matter. And if you've been attending the live sessions each week, you will know that we've covered this topic in detail several times because it is confusing to separate these words and make sure that you know the difference. So having them defined in your notes is a great start. All right, so here are the lesson goals, and I'm going to take a quick snip of all 9 guiding questions. So we have quite a few to answer here. I'll just put them over on another page so we can make sure to refer to those as we read through. All right. So the first guiding question that we're looking for says, all atoms of elements listed in each row of the periodic table have the same number of what? So we're going to take a look at that. Here we talk about atoms and the periodic table. You're already familiar with atoms, electrons, elements, and their relation to the periodic table. You may remember that the electrons of an atom are arranged in energy levels called shells. Each shell can hold a specific number of electrons and no more. Moving from left to right across the rows in the periodic table, there is one more electron in the outer shell in each element in each row. So if we look back at that question, what are we trying to find again? All atoms of elements listed in each row have the same number of what? So when a shell is full, electrons will form a new shell further from the nucleus. So here it is. All atoms of elements listed in each row of the periodic table have the same number of shells. So that is your answer to number 1. The outer or valence shell of these atoms will add more electrons until the shell is full. This creates a noble gas. All the noble gases have a full outer electron shell of electrons. So that last sentence might be handy to have in your notes. And then the other thing you may want to add is as you move left to right across the rows in the periodic table, there's one more electron in each outer shell. That's also noteworthy. So moving on to question 2, it says, how are valence electrons related to chemical bonding? So that's what we're looking for next. We're also taking a quick look at the periodic table and what is this slide trying to tell us. So it's showing us oxygen. It is just trying to figure out what are they sharing here with you. You're looking at different elements and you're looking at number of protons, where they are on the periodic table. And it doesn't really give you any additional information there. All right, maybe on the next slide. So outer shell or valence electrons are of special interest because they form bonds with other atoms. Bonding determines chemical reactions that occur among elements. These chemical reactions cause many changes all around you and inside your body every day. So that question, how are valence electrons related to chemical bonding? They are basically forming the bonds with other atoms. So right in here. And then life within a plant cell is supported by the formation of bonds hundreds of times a second. Plants take in carbon dioxide, which we've seen as CO2, and throughout photosynthesis, they break down CO2 and H2O, water, bonds to form glucose, which is like sugar, kind of a food that plants eat, and other compounds. Atomic bonds are important in determining chemical, physical, and biological properties of matter. So we've answered guiding question 2. Why do valence electrons form bonds instead of the core electrons? So remember, valence electrons are the ones on the outer shell. And the outer shell electrons have a weaker attraction to the protons in the nucleus. So this little question and answer might be something else you want to include in your notes. As we move on, we're looking for question number 3 now. Guiding question 3 says, how are molecules formed? So we are ready to go. This talks about molecule formation. So you can kind of see the pattern here. The questions are easily identified in the title. 2 or more atoms join together through bonds. Chemical bonds form when atoms share or exchange electrons, allowing each atom to have a complete valence shell. In sharing electrons between 2 atoms, a covalent bond is formed. So you want this definition. Covalent bond, electrons are shared, not transferred. And we have this image, sharing electrons. So this would be a place that it would be okay to copy the picture or put the picture in to show what a covalent bond looks like. So when chemical bonding of 2 or more atoms occurs, a molecule is formed. So what is a molecule and how are they formed, right? That's what we were looking for, guiding question 3. A molecule is any compound. So compound is 2 or more atoms that are resulting from 1 or more elements joined by electron sharing. So 1 or more elements. So remember, a molecule could be H2, which is 2 hydrogen atoms, or it could be H2O, where it's just showing a joining of atoms. All right, so you want that definition. And then the answer to guiding question 3, how are they formed? When chemical bonding of 2 or more atoms occurs. So a chemical bond has formed. That is number 3. And then observe the hydrogen molecule, H2. It's shown here, so that's what this picture is. Each hydrogen atom has a single electron because the atomic number of hydrogen is 1. And so its outer shell holds a maximum of 2 electrons, even though it only has 1. By forming a bond, the 2 atoms share the electrons. Both atoms end up with a full outer shell. And in this example, there's only 1 outer shell of electrons for each atom of hydrogen. So you can see this outer shell, 2 is as many as it can hold. When it bonds together, it's got a full shell, so that makes it more stable. So what other element holds a maximum of 2 electrons in its only valence shell? And that would be helium. Helium's element number 2. And it is the other atom that completes its valence with 2 electrons. Helium is considered a noble gas because its valence is complete. All right. So question 4 says, what's the difference between an atom and a molecule? Okay, so we're looking at this chart and we'll be able to get that information. The words atom and molecule are easily confused, but they have distinctly different meanings. Before moving on, check to make sure you recognize the difference between them. So an atom does not contain a bond. The element oxygen is an example of an atom. Breathable oxygen, O2, so this is when we have 2 atoms, is a molecule because now we have 2 or more. Contains 2 plus atoms of the same element. That's just what we saw here, so we know that this is a molecule. Contains at least 1 bond. So if it's bonding, it has to be a molecule, and contains only 1 element. So that's the difference. This chart may be really good to put in your notes. So if we check that, we got everything correct. And that also is the answer to number 4. You can write down the difference. So question 5, we're looking at how are physical and chemical changes alike and different. So bonds and changes. Chemical changes occur when the identity of a substance changes. This occurs because chemical bonds between atoms are broken and the new ones are formed, creating new substances. Burning, rusting, and digesting food are examples of chemical changes. Physical changes occur when the identity of a substance does not change, but only its physical state changes. So this sentence, really great for your notes, same as this first sentence. And you could even include the chemical bonds between atoms are broken and new ones are formed, so creating a new substance. That's good information for notes. So these changes do not involve the formation or breaking of chemical bonds. Melting, boiling, folding, cutting, those are all examples of physical changes. So question 5 said, how are they alike and how are they different? So we're seeing a change, that's how they're alike, but how they're different, physical changes, the identity does not change, and a chemical change it does. So are chemical bonds formed when ice melts? No, because we still have H2O and we're not bonding with any other element. So it's not changing H2O. So that was a water example. So how about when a log burns? We know that anytime something burns, it is a chemical change. This reaction is called combustion, or the burning of a substance, and it forms a new substance. So this would be great to have in your notes too. And the identity of the logs change, right? They look different. They're burned into ash, and the chemical bonds are formed. So that's the answer to number 5. Number 6, how are molecules and compounds alike and different? So molecules versus compounds. A molecule is 2 or more atoms bonded together. The atoms can be the same type of atom or different types of atoms. A molecule is the smallest particle of a compound that has the same properties of the compound. So that would be a really good thing to have in your notes. That's the definition and how it's built, basically. Compounds consist of 2 or more different types of atoms bonded together. I would put that in your notes as well. And here are some examples that might be helpful. Hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, is both a molecule and a compound. However, hydrogen gas, H2, is considered only a molecule and not a compound because it contains only one type of atom. So all of this actually would be great to have in your notes because it's very helpful in helping you distinguish the difference. All right, so moving on to question 7, how are new compounds created? And we can see that answer is going to be under this title. It says bonds are crucial to the formation of new compounds. So that's an answer, bonding. And then the word crucial, in case you don't know, it just means critical in the success of something. But in the image, we're seeing the rusting iron nail, and that the nail is undergoing a chemical change called oxidation. So the rust is a new compound, which is called iron oxide, and it's formed when iron atoms in the nail bond with oxygen atoms in the air. So look at the chemical formula for iron oxide, Fe2O3. Fe is a symbol for iron, O is a symbol for oxygen. The subscripts, those are the little numbers that are following the letters, indicate the compound iron oxide contains 2 atoms of iron. So we're looking at the 2 here, and that there are 3 atoms of oxygen. Okay, so we know those compounds are formed or created by bonds. So that's number 7. And number 8, how does a chemical formula tell you the number and the type of atoms in a compound? And we kind of just looked at that. We saw that, let me see if we're looking at that here. I think so. And then the last question, the difference between an element and a compound. Okay, making sure that we're not skipping too far ahead. So as we look at molecules in life, you eat and drink molecules every day. Your body takes in the molecules and converts them into other molecules through chemical reactions. So sucrose, which is table sugar, has the formula C12H22O11. The formula indicates that it is made of 12 carbon atoms, 22 hydrogen atoms, and 11 oxygen atoms. So this might be a good thing to put in your notes if you're still kind of trying to figure out what those subscripts are and what they mean. And there are other types of sugars that are also made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Glucose is a type of sugar that plants make during photosynthesis, and its formula is C6H12O6. So you can see it's very similar to sucrose. And the formula indicates that it is made of 6 carbon atoms, 12 hydrogen atoms, and 6 atoms of oxygen. So if we're looking at question 8, talking about how does the formula tell you the number and type of atoms in a compound, it does that by the subscript telling you how many atoms of that element are in the formula. And then how do you know the difference, or how do you tell the difference between an element and a compound? That is number 9. So changing it up, this is a great activity to go through to make sure that you understand the difference of molecules and compounds. So molecules and compounds have similarities and differences. What are they and how are they made? So what kind of change do they undergo? Differentiate between a compound and a molecule. And which of these is a molecule but not a compound? Okay, so remember, a molecule is just 2 or more atoms of any type. A compound is when you have 2 atoms with different elements. So if you look, all of these have different elements except for the nitrogen. So that's how we know it's correct. So if we look at the next one, the following is a chemical or physical change. Ice melting. We know that ice is still H2O even when it turns into water. So that is a physical change. And then identify which, or the physical change, which of these is not a chemical reaction. So photosynthesis, cellular respiration, boiling water, oxidation. So we know that photosynthesis is changing glucose, or in making a plant making its food using the sunlight. So that's definitely a chemical reaction happening. Cellular respiration, we know using oxygen. Boiling water just means that H2O is heated up. There's no change in the H2O bonding or becoming another substance. And then oxidation, we know that's oxygen reacting with something. So boiling water would be the physical change here. That's not a chemical reaction. Here, identify the compound, which is a compound. And remember, this one has more than one element. So that's why it's correct. Identify the characteristics of a chemical reaction. What is a characteristic of a chemical reaction? Bonds are broken, bonds are formed, new substances are made. So all of those things happen in a chemical reaction. And identify how molecules are formed. So the formation of a molecule involves the sharing of, remember, it's not all the electrons, it's just the valence electrons that are on the outer shell. And number 7, what describes both a molecule and a compound? So if it's a molecule and a compound, it has to have 2 or more elements. It cannot be all the same element. It has to be, it's 2 or more atoms. That could just be 2 oxygens. So it has to have 2 or more elements to be a compound. Oh, did I miss that? I clicked wrong here. Only compounds require more than 1 element. So I must have just misclicked there. 2 or more atoms. Which one is it asking? Which describes both a molecule and a compound. Okay, sorry. Only compounds. So if I picked this one, it has to actually describe both. Sorry, I read that backwards. So it has to fit both molecule and compound. And so we know that a molecule has 2 or more atoms for sure, and a compound has 2 or more atoms. A compound also has to have 2 or more elements, but a molecule does not, so that is why that one's not correct. So yes, sorry, I misread that. And the next one is wood burns to produce carbon dioxide and water. So wood burning we know is chemical, and we are correct there. All right, so going on, the last thing you can look at to help you identify, you're going to look at the formulas and the symbols of these examples, which are examples of elements and which are examples of compounds. So this one, He, because we see that lowercase, this means it's just one element, that's helium. Here we see H2O2, that is a compound because there are 2 different elements here. This one has 2 or more elements. This one is just an element. And then HBr, this is bromine, hydrogen, so that's a compound. So that gets you through the end of the lesson. Lots of things to take notes on and put in as your notes. You can go through these, add those to your notes as well. And then just as we're wrapping up, look for the Flip follow-up session in your Class Connect schedule. There are also recordings of our sessions that you can watch as well. And then attend a help lab if you need any extra help. Have a great day.